I need some space, Elaine. Those 5 words shattered my world just 3 days after we buried Walter. 35 years of marriage, and Gregory couldn't even wait a week after his father's funeral before deciding our life together wasn't worth fighting for anymore. I stood frozen in our kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd prepared thousands of meals for Walter over the past decade, watching my husband pack a suitcase like I was nothing more than a stranger. A stranger who had given up her career, her independence, and 10 years of her life to care for his father. 10 years of my dad's illness has stolen our lives, Gregory said, not even looking me in the eye. Now I need time for myself. Time for himself. As if I hadn't sacrificed every minute of my time for his family. As if I hadn't spent countless nights awake while he slept soundly in another room. As if I hadn't measured medications, changed adult diapers, and held Walter's trembling hands while Gregory was working late again. The diamond on my wedding ring caught the afternoon light, splitting it into prisms across the kitchen wall. 35 years of promises reduced to colors dancing on wallpaper. I thought about all those mornings I'd woken up early to ensure Walter had breakfast before Gregory left for work. All those evenings I'd spent helping Walter bathe while Gregory claimed exhaustion and retreated to his study with a glass of scotch. When exactly did you decide this? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. Was it before or after I gave up my accounting firm partnership to care for your father? Gregory paused his packing, a flash of guilt crossing his face before it hardened again into practiced indifference. This isn't about Walter. It's about us. We've grown apart. Grown apart, I echoed. We didn't grow apart. Gregory, you walked away while I stayed exactly where you asked me to be. He zipped his suitcase with finality. I'll call you in a few days to discuss arrangements. The front door closed with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than if he'd slammed it. And just like that, Gregory was gone, leaving me alone in the house that had been both my prison and my purpose for the past decade. My name is Elaine Thompson, and at 58, I found myself abandoned after dedicating a decade of my life to caring for my father-in-law. Before Walter moved in with us, I was a certified public accountant with a thriving career at one of Boston's largest accounting firms. I'd built a reputation for myself as someone who could untangle even the most complex financial situations. Numbers never lied, and they always made sense to me, even when people didn't. Gregory and I had what I thought was a solid marriage. He was a successful structural engineer who designed commercial buildings across New England. We lived in a beautiful colonial-style home in a quiet Boston suburb, enjoyed regular dinner parties with friends, and traveled to Europe every other summer. We had one daughter, Olivia, who had moved to California after college to work in tech. Everything changed the day Walter was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Gregory was his only child, and there was never any question about what would happen next. Walter would move in with us. It's the right thing to do, Gregory had said, and I agreed. I really did. Walter had always been kind to me, treating me like the daughter he never had. He was a retired history professor with a gentle demeanor who loved to read and discuss politics. When he'd lost his wife to cancer 15 years earlier, he'd faced it with quiet dignity. How could I deny him the care he needed when he'd always shown such kindness to our family? I started by reducing my hours at work, thinking I could balance both responsibilities. I created a home office in our guest room, kept a few key clients, and tried to maintain my professional credentials. But as Walter's condition progressed, it became clear that halfway measures wouldn't work. The day I found him wandering in our backyard at 3 a.m., confused and frightened, was the day I realized I couldn't do both. Something had to give, and it wouldn't be Walter's care. So I resigned from my position as senior accountant, just a temporary break. I told myself, I'll go back when things improve. But deep down, I knew that with dual neurodegenerative diseases, things wouldn't improve. Walter would only require more care, not less. As time went on, Gregory seemed appreciative at first. "You're amazing, Elaine," he'd say, kissing me on the forehead before heading off to work. "I don't know what Dad and I would do without you." But those words of gratitude became increasingly rare as the months turned into years. It wasn't easy becoming a full-time caregiver. I had to learn everything from how to safely transfer Walter from his bed to his wheelchair, to managing his medications, to dealing with the heartbreaking moments when he couldn't remember who I was. I kept meticulous records of his symptoms, medications, and doctor's appointments, applying the same analytical skills I'd used in my accounting career to his care. For the first few years, Gregory would help on weekends taking Walter to the park or sitting with him while I caught up on sleep. But gradually, his work hours seemed to extend. There were more business trips, more late nights at the office, more weekends when he needed to catch up on a project. "The firm's going through a restructuring," he'd explain. "These projects are crucial for my position." I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because the alternative that he was deliberately avoiding the increasingly difficult reality of his father's care was too painful to consider. I remember one Tuesday evening particularly well. Walter had been having a difficult day, his confusion causing him to become agitated. He'd knocked over his lunch, accused me of stealing his watch, which was on his wrist, and fallen while trying to get out of bed on his own. I was exhausted, having been up since 4 a.m. when he'd had a nightmare. When Gregory called to say he'd be late again, something in me snapped. "Your father asked for you 3 times today," I said. "He keeps forgetting you're at work and thinks you're avoiding him." There was a pause on the line. "What do you want me to do, Elaine?" "Quit my job. Someone has to pay the bills." His words stung like a slap, as if my unpaid labor wasn't contributing anything, as if the robust disability and retirement income from Walter's university position wasn't helping our finances. "I'm not asking you to quit," I said. "I'm asking you to come home at a reasonable hour once in a while. I'm asking you to spend time with your father while he still recognizes you." "I'll try to be home by 8, he said, but his tone made it clear this was an inconvenience. He arrived at 9:30 smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, claiming the subway had delays. I should have recognized the signs then, but I was too tired, too overwhelmed with Walter's care to see what was happening right in front of me. Or perhaps I didn't want to see it. By year 5, Walter needed help with every aspect of daily living. He could no longer dress himself, struggled to feed himself, and had moments of confusion that sometimes led to anger or tears. Some nights I would be up every hour helping him to the bathroom or calming him after a nightmare. On the worst days, he would call me by his late wife's name or not recognize me at all. The physical toll was immense. My back ached constantly from lifting him. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under my eyes. My hands developed a slight tremor from exhaustion, but the emotional toll was even greater. Watching this brilliant man who had once lectured on American history to auditoriums full of students struggle to remember what year it was or how to use a spoon. There was a day in winter when snow had piled up outside our windows, creating that unique hush that comes with heavy snowfall. Walter was having a rare good day. His medications seemed to be working perfectly, and his mind was clearer than it had been in months. "Elaine," he said, patting the seat beside him on the sofa. "Come sit with me." I joined him, and to my surprise he took my hand in his, trembling one. "I know what's happening to me," he said, his voice stronger than usual. "I know I'm disappearing, and I know what it's costing you to witness it." Tears filled my eyes. "Walter, it's okay." "No," he interrupted gently. "It's not okay, but I want you to know that even when I seem gone, even when I can't remember your name or why you're helping me somewhere, deep inside, I'm grateful I see your kindness. I see your sacrifice." That evening was a gift I held close during the darker days that followed. Through it all, I tried to maintain Walter's dignity. I played his favorite classical music during his morning routine. I read to him from history books, even when I wasn't sure how much he understood. I created photo albums with clear labels to help him remember our family. And when he had moments of clarity, I treasured them like precious gifts. "You're a good person, Elaine," he told me during one such moment about 7 years. In his hand trembling from Parkinson's rested on mine. "I know what you gave up for me. I haven't forgotten that." The fact that he could still recognize what I'd sacrificed when my own husband seemed to have forgotten made me cry that night after Walter was asleep. I cried for the career I'd lost, for the husband who was drifting away, and for the man slowly disappearing before my eyes, despite my best efforts. Throughout those years, I maintained a small freelance accounting practice, just enough to keep my skills sharp and provide a modest income that was mine alone. I worked during Walter's afternoon naps or late at night when the house was quiet. It wasn't much compared to my former career, but it gave me a sense that I hadn't completely lost myself. As Walter's condition deteriorated, Gregory became increasingly distant. Our conversations revolved around Walter's care, household logistics, or Gregory's work. We rarely went out together anymore. Finding reliable respite care was difficult, and Gregory always seemed too tired or busy anyway. Physical intimacy had long since become a memory. "When this is over," Gregory would say occasionally, "we'll take that trip to Italy we always talked about. We'll get our lives back." I clung to that promise during the darkest moments, imagining us walking hand in hand through Tuscan vineyards or sipping espresso in a Roman piazza. The last year of Walter's life was the hardest. Hospice came 3 times a week, which helped, but the bulk of his care still fell to me. Gregory was away on a major project in Chicago that couldn't be delegated. He made it home every other weekend, but even then he seemed preoccupied, constantly, checking his phone and taking calls in another room. When Walter passed away peacefully in his sleep, I felt an overwhelming mix of grief and relief. Grief for the kind man who'd suffered so much, and yes, relief that his suffering and mine had finally ended. Gregory flew home immediately, and together we planned the funeral service. It was during those 3 days between Walter's death and the funeral that I first noticed something odd. Gregory was protective of his phone in a way he hadn't been before, turning it face down when I entered the room and taking calls in the basement where I couldn't overhear. I was too exhausted and grief-stricken to think much of it at the time. The funeral was lovely, with many of Walter's former colleagues paying their respects. Gregory gave a touching eulogy about his father's dedication to education and family. I sat in the front row accepting condolences and thinking that now, finally, Gregory and I could begin rebuilding our life together. How naive I was. 3 days after we buried Walter, Gregory packed his bags and left. Just like that, 10 years of sacrifice dismissed with 5 cruel words. "I need some space. Elaine." I was still in shock when Olivia called the next day. "Mom, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice tight with anger. "Dad's living with someone named Cassandra. He's been seeing her for at least 2 years. I found out when he asked for her address to forward his mail." The floor seemed to drop away beneath me. 2 years. Which meant that while I was changing Walter's diapers and managing his medications, Gregory had been building a life with another woman. All those late nights and business trips suddenly made sickening sense. "Did you know?" Olivia asked. "No," I whispered. I had no idea. After we hung up, I sat at our kitchen table for hours, unmoving. Then something in me shifted. The accountant who had been dormant for 10 years reawakened. I went to our home office and began pulling financial records, bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds, tax returns. It didn't take long to find the discrepancies. Large withdrawals from our joint savings, stock sales that hadn't been reinvested, a mysterious LLC formed 3 years ago that seemed to own a condo in downtown Boston. Gregory had been systematically moving assets for years, preparing for this moment. I was still analyzing the documents when I found something else. Preliminary paperwork for selling our home. The home I'd maintained while caring for Walter. The home where I'd sacrificed my career, my independence, and a decade of my life. He was planning to sell it out from under me. That night, I called my old friend Diana. We'd fallen out of touch during the years of Walter's illness. Maintaining friendships had been yet another casualty of my caregiving role, but she answered on the second ring. "He did what?" she exclaimed after I explained the situation. "Elaine, you need a lawyer, not just any lawyer. You need a shark." And I know exactly who to call. 2 days later, I was sitting in the office of Veronica Miller, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthless. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, after reviewing the financial documents I'd brought, "your husband has been systematically hiding assets. That's not just unethical, it's illegal during a divorce proceeding. And based on what you've shown me about your contributions to the family, particularly your decade of unpaid caregiving, you're entitled to significantly more than he's offering." For the first time since Gregory left, I felt a glimmer of hope. "What do you suggest we do?" Veronica smiled, a predatory gleam in her eye. "We're going to use your financial expertise to build a case that even your husband's lawyers can't dismantle. And then, we're going to take back what's rightfully yours." Over the next few weeks, I channeled all my pain and betrayal into action. I pulled out the financial skills that had lain dormant for a decade and turned them into weapons of justice. Numbers had always been my allies, and now they would become my armor. Each evening after dinner, I would sit at my dining room table, the same table where I'd fed Walter thousands of meals, surrounded by bank statements, property records, and tax returns. I created detailed spreadsheets documenting every aspect of Walter's care and its market value, $28 per hour, for basic care multiplied by 16 hours daily, for 3,050 days, $100 to $110,000 per year for the specialized dementia and Parkinson's care he required in later years. The $175,000 in home modifications we'd made to accommodate his wheelchair and prevent falls. I calculated the opportunity cost of my lost career with cold precision, the partnership I'd been on track for at my accounting firm, worth approximately $225,000 annually, the retirement contributions that would have accumulated, the professional development and networking opportunities forever lost. By the time I finished that particular spreadsheet, the figure stared back at me from the screen. $27 million in lost earnings and benefits. Late into the night, I followed digital breadcrumbs through our finances, tracking down every account Gregory had tried to hide. The LLC registered in Delaware that held the condo where he presumably lived with Cassandra. The offshore account in the Cayman Islands that had received regular transfers from our joint investments. The second life insurance policy listing an unknown beneficiary. With each discovery, my anger crystallized into determination. This wasn't just about money, it was about recognizing the value of what I had given. It was about refusing to let Gregory's betrayal define the next chapter of my life. I also retrieved Walter's will from his files, blowing dust off the folder that Gregory had conveniently forgotten to review with me. As I read through the legal language, one paragraph made me gasp aloud. Walter had left a substantial portion of his estate directly to me. "For the loving care you've provided." The document read. Gregory had never mentioned this, though as the executor, he must have known Walter's final gift to me wasn't just financial. It was validation. He had seen my sacrifice and honored it, even as his son had taken it for granted. Diana became my rock during this time, stopping by with meals, accompanying me to meetings with Veronica, and reminding me that I deserved better. "This isn't just a divorce," she told me over coffee one morning. "This is reclaiming your life." Olivia flew in from California for a week, helping me organize documents and offering emotional support. Together we went through old photographs, tangible evidence of the years I'd devoted to her grandfather's care, while her father gradually disappeared from the pictures. "I can't believe Dad did this to you," she said one night as we sorted through financial records. "After everything you did for Grandpa, I'm so sorry, Mom." It's not your fault, I told her, squeezing her hand. And I'm not the same woman who let herself be taken advantage of. Not anymore. When Gregory finally reached out, it wasn't to apologize or reconcile. It was to demand that I agree to sell the house. We need to liquidate our assets, he said, as if we were discussing a business transaction rather than the home I'd maintained for decades. I think we should discuss this with our lawyers present, I replied calmly, feeling a strange sense of power in my newfound assertiveness. Lawyers. Elaine, this doesn't need to get ugly. Just sign the papers. I'll see you at Veronica Miller's office on Thursday at 2 p.m., I said, and hung up. The look on Gregory's face when he walked into the conference room and saw me sitting beside Veronica with 3 thick binders of financial documentation in front of me was worth every late night I'd spent preparing. His lawyer, an expensive-looking man in a tailored suit, immediately looked concerned. Before we begin, Veronica said, I'd like to establish the full financial picture. She proceeded to outline in devastating detail every account Gregory had hidden, every asset he tried to obscure, and every penny of Walter's care that could be quantified. Additionally, she continued, we have evidence that Mr. Thompson has been maintaining a separate household for at least 2 years, while Mrs. Thompson was providing round-the-clock care for his father, saving the family approximately $150,000 annually in professional nursing costs. We've also discovered that Mr. Thompson has been aware of but concealing a significant bequest from Walter Thompson to Mrs. Thompson. Gregory's lawyer leaned over to whisper something to him. Gregory's face had gone from confident to ashen. Given these circumstances, Veronica concluded, Mrs. Thompson is entitled to the family home, half of all marital assets, including those Mr. Thompson attempted to hide, and additional compensation for her decade of unpaid labor as a caregiver. The meeting lasted for 3 hours. Gregory's lawyer kept requesting breaks to confer with his client. By the end, a preliminary agreement had been drafted that gave me the house a significant portion of our savings and ongoing alimony. As we were gathering our papers to leave, I finally spoke directly to Gregory. You know what the ironic thing is? I would have given you a divorce if you'd asked. After Walter died, I would have split everything fairly. All you had to do was be honest. Gregory couldn't meet my eyes. Elaine, You can save it, I interrupted. The numbers tell me everything I need to know about what I meant to you. And numbers don't lie. That night I slept better than I had in years. The weight that had pressed on my chest since Gregory's departure had lightened. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't responsible for anyone but myself, and I was discovering that I was worth fighting for. The divorce proceedings moved forward. It wasn't always smooth. Gregory contested some points, and there were delays and frustrations. His lawyer sent aggressive letters claiming I had abandoned my career voluntarily and that the alleged care for Walter had been exaggerated. Each accusation felt like a knife twisting deeper into the wound of betrayal. But I had evidence Gregory couldn't dispute. I had daily care logs, medical records with my signature as caregiver, and testimonials from Walter's doctors. I had neighbors willing to testify about Gregory's frequent absences. Most importantly, I had financial records that told the undeniable truth about where he'd been and what he'd been doing. He's getting desperate. Veronica told me after a particularly heated negotiation session. His lawyer knows they're fighting a losing battle. The process took an emotional toll. There were days when I could barely get out of bed, when the magnitude of Gregory's betrayal threatened to drown me. Diana would come over on those days, pull open the curtains, and practically drag me into the shower. You didn't survive 10 years of caregiving to let that man destroy you now. She'd say, her voice firm but kind. Get dressed. We're going to the park. Those walks through Boston. Common became my therapy. The fresh air and movement gradually rebuilding my spirit as surely as my legal case was rebuilding my future. 2 months after that initial meeting, I received a text from an unknown number. This is Cassandra. I thought you should know. Gregory and I are done. He's not the man I thought he was. I'm sorry for my part in this. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the delete button. I wondered what lies Gregory had told her about me, about our marriage. Had he painted me as cold, neglectful, too focused on his father? Had he made her believe their affair was justified? In the end, I simply replied, "Thank you for telling me." I wasn't surprised by their breakup. Cassandra had signed up for a successful engineer with hidden assets, not a man fighting an expensive divorce with a newly empowered ex-wife. Whatever fantasy Gregory had constructed about starting fresh with his younger girlfriend had crumbled under the weight of reality and financial consequences. 6 months after Gregory moved out, the divorce was finalized. I kept the house, received half of our retirement savings, including the hidden portions, and was awarded substantial alimony based on my sacrificed career and years of unpaid caregiving. The court also enforced Walter's bequest to me, which Gregory had attempted to challenge. With financial security established, I faced a new question. Who was I now? Not just Gregory's ex-wife, not just Walter's former caregiver. Who was Elaine Thompson, and what did she want from the rest of her life? I started by renewing my CPA license, completing the required continuing education courses online. It was challenging to get back into the technical aspects of accounting after so many years, but I discovered that my mind was still sharp, still hungry for intellectual stimulation. One afternoon, while working through a particularly complex tax problem, I had an epiphany. There was an entire population of people like me, caregivers who had sacrificed careers, individuals navigating major life transitions, older adults confused by financial systems that seemed designed to take advantage of them. They needed someone who understood both finances and the human cost of care. Within 3 months, I had opened a small accounting practice specializing in financial planning for caregivers and seniors. I rented a modest office space near my home and began with just a handful of clients referred by Diana and other friends. My tagline was simple: financial clarity during life's transitions. The business grew steadily. I hired an assistant, then another accountant. I developed workshops specifically for people who were caring for aging parents or disabled spouses. Protecting your financial future while caring for others became my signature presentation at community centers and assisted living facilities across Boston. Olivia decided to move back east, taking a remote position with her tech company. California's too expensive. Anyway, she claimed, but I knew she wanted to be closer to me. She moved into an apartment just 15 minutes from my house, and we established a Sunday dinner tradition that became the highlight of my week. A year after the divorce was finalized, I received an email from Gregory. He was struggling financially. The divorce settlement and the loss of Cassandra's income had hit him hard. He asked if I would consider meeting for coffee to discuss financial matters. I thought about it for 3 days before responding. I'm not interested in revisiting our past. If you need financial advice, my office takes appointments on Tuesdays and Thursdays. My assistant can provide you with my professional rates. He never made an appointment. Instead, I heard through mutual friends that he had taken a position in Chicago, where his company had a smaller office. In a way, I was relieved. Boston was my home, filled with friends, memories, and now a thriving business. I didn't need to worry about awkward encounters at the grocery store or local restaurants. As my practice grew, I began speaking at national conferences about financial planning for caregivers. The first time I stood at a podium facing hundreds of financial professionals, my hands trembled so badly I could barely hold my notes. But when I began to speak about the hidden financial costs of caregiving costs, I knew intimately the room fell silent with attention. We quantify everything in our profession, I told them, except the value of care. We can calculate the cost of a nursing home to the penny, but we struggle to measure what it means when a daughter gives up her career to care for a father with dementia, or a husband spends his retirement years caring for a wife with Parkinson's. Today, I want to give you the tools to make that calculation and to help your clients protect themselves while they protect their loved ones. After that first speech, a line of people waited to speak with me: financial planners with clients in caregiving situations, attorneys specializing in elder law, and many individuals who had their own caregiving stories. I realized I had found not just a business niche, but a mission. I wrote articles for financial magazines with titles like The Caregiver's Financial Survival Guide and Planning for the Hidden Costs of Family Care. I started a blog called Balancing the Books of Care that developed a loyal following. I was becoming known as an expert in a field I had essentially created, the intersection of caregiving and financial planning. One afternoon, I received an email from a publisher asking if I would consider writing a book. The thought of distilling my experience and expertise into something that could reach thousands of people filled me with purpose. I titled it Accounting for Care, a financial guide for those who put others first. The day I held the finished book in my hands with my name on the cover, I wept with a complex mixture of pride, vindication, and lingering grief for the years lost. I still lived in the same house, but I had renovated Walter's old room into a peaceful home office with large windows overlooking the garden. I'd removed the hospital bed, the medical equipment, the reminders of illness and decline. In their place stood elegant bookshelves, a comfortable consultation area for clients, and my grandmother's antique desk that had been in storage throughout Walter's illness. The room where I had bathed, medicated, and comforted Walter through his darkest moments, now filled with sunlight and the soft sounds of classical music, the same composers he had loved. Sometimes when I sat there working on a client's financial plan, I thought about how my life had come full circle. The skills I had put aside to care for Walter were now being used to help others navigate similar journeys. I felt his presence sometimes, especially in early mornings when the light was just beginning to filter through the trees. Not in a ghostly way, but in the peaceful knowledge that he would be proud of what I had created from the ashes of those difficult years. 3 years after Gregory left, Diana convinced me to try dating again. I was reluctant at first. At 61, I wasn't sure I had the energy for romance, but I created a profile on a dating site for professionals over 50, and to my surprise, I enjoyed meeting new people. You light up when you talk about your work. One date told me over dinner at a small Italian restaurant, "It's clear you've found your calling." None of the dates led to serious relationships, but they helped me remember that I was more than just an accountant, more than just an ex-wife or former caregiver. I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under years of responsibility. My love of theater, my dry sense of humor, my enjoyment of new experiences. I was Elaine Thompson, a woman who had been broken but had rebuilt herself into someone stronger and wiser, someone who understood both spreadsheets and suffering, both financial statements, and the incalculable value of human care. On the 5th anniversary of Walter's death, I visited his grave with fresh flowers. "Thank you," I said to the quiet headstone. "If it hadn't been for you, for caring for you, I might never have discovered my true strength." As I turned to leave, I saw an elderly woman struggling to navigate the cemetery's uneven ground with her cane. I offered my arm for support, and she gratefully accepted. "Visiting my husband," she explained. 43 years together wasn't enough." "I understand." I said I cared for my father-in-law for 10 years before he passed. She looked at me with knowing eyes. "That's a labor of love few people understand." It was. I agreed, and it taught me more than I ever expected to learn. As I helped her back to her car, she handed me her card. "My friends and I have a support group for widows and caregivers. You should join us sometime." I smiled, tucking the card into my pocket. "I'd like that. And if you ever need help making sense of Medicare or Social Security benefits, that's what I do." She patted my hand. Isn't that wonderful? Taking your pain and turning it into something that helps others. That's how we heal. Driving home. I thought about the strange winding path my life had taken. If someone had told me on the day Walter moved in that I would end up divorced, running my own specialized accounting practice, and feeling more fulfilled than I had in decades, I would never have believed them. That evening, I sat in my garden with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Dinner Sunday. I'm bringing someone special I want you to meet." I smiled, typing back, looking forward to it. The garden was blooming with the perennials I'd planted last year, life continuing its cycle of renewal. I'd learned that endings, even painful ones, often lead to unexpected beginnings. My decade of caregiving had cost me dearly, but it had also given me gifts I never anticipated: resilience, purpose, and the discovery of my own worth. Gregory had walked away thinking he was reclaiming his freedom at my expense. Instead, he had inadvertently set me free to become the woman I was always meant to be. The numbers in my life had finally balanced, and the equation made perfect sense.